America, my name is Osei-Frimpong, and you're watching The Black Athenians, and I come to you 4-ish on Fridays from Broderick Flanagan's studio in Triangle Plaza. Broderick Flanagan is a wonderful black entrepreneur who works in Athens, Georgia, and I'm in Triangle Plaza. It's at 585 Vine Street. And today we're going to talk about you need to traumatize in order to revolutionize. Now, trauma gets a bad rap, and black people, we do know our trauma, but there's a very peculiar kind of trauma that's necessary for us to get the quality of politics we need in order to be made whole. And that's what this is all about. And that quality of trauma is a quality of betrayal. As long as you think that the world works, you're going to be a bad ally. As long as you think that the system works and the system is just, you're going to be a bad ally. You know who are good allies? People who've been fired for doing the right thing. You know who are good allies? People who've been broken up with or whatever for doing the right thing. Those people are good allies. So there's a very peculiar kind of trauma where you actually realize that the world is organized not only to control your behavior, but to control your mind, how you think about your behavior. You need to realize that the world is coming against you and trying to take your cookies. And that's when you could actually do the quality of work that the revolution needs. As long as, and honestly, if you're black, if you're a black Democrat, if you're a Democrat in the South, there are a lot of people who actually think that Republican rule is just fine. And that's why Democrats don't win. Right? There are a lot, especially white people, white Democrats who talk about being like, progressive and left, but they actually think the system works just fine. And until you traumatize them into understanding that it doesn't, they will continue to kind of half do their job. Will continue to be the Washington Generals of Southern politics. We are paid to lose. So until you appropriately traumatize your allies, until they feel that betrayal from the system, they aren't really your allies. They're kind of half-hearted, but still like kind of invested in the system. And with that, we're going to get into it. With that, go ahead and hit the beat.
To the beat, y'all.
Yeah. Sound good to me. Never change the ways for the world or the government. If I was the president, then I would state facts. You leave it up to me, I paint the White House black and ain't no future in your front.
To the beat, y'all.
All right, so I'm sure a lot of you people have heard of the term Negro wake-up call. It's that moment where you kind of realize that what being black means. And unfortunately, there are a lot of black people don't know what being black means. They end up blaming themselves. But anyway, the Negro wake-up call, it's often termed otherwise, is that moment something happens where you understand what it means to be black in these United States. Like I said, it's usually you get fired from the first job for like actually doing something right, like standing up for black people, or something goes south with a police officer. There are many varieties of Negro wake-up calls, but it's that quality of trauma that lets you actually understand that the entire world is out to get you, and that the system as it stands is not only has designs on your behavior, but it has designs on your mind. Because like I said before, and like Bobby Wright said before me, if you control someone's mind, you control someone's behind. So the system has designs, black people, on how you think about yourself. And until you realize that the design the system has on your mind for how you think about yourself is not consistent with like your freedom and your self-determination, you will continue to be a tool. You will continue to be a tool and confused and not understand the stakes. And you'll actually be a bad ally for me with respect to, restorative justice, making my people whole. So understand that the system has designs on your mind, and politics is in the appropriate quality of revolutionary politics is going to feel invasive. It's going to feel invasive. So like, well, I don't want to change. Well, you know what? You're going to have to change. It's going to feel invasive the way surgery is invasive. And if you have cancer, the surgeon's going to hope to take that cancer out. So at the end, you will be different. You will be changed. You will be cancer-free. And that's going to be and through an invasive medical agenda. Now, I have an invasive conversational agenda. I have an invasive political agenda. And with my invasive political agenda, some white people are going to get in their feelings. They're going to act violently, quite possibly. That's just what they've always done with like serious politics geared towards making black communities whole. And they're going to get violent, but we're going to do what we got to do because it's right. But yes, make no mistake, this is invasive. It's going to feel invasive because you need to be invaded. You need to understand the levels of conspiracy that try to keep entire black communities down. So there are ways in which we think nature will solve this. And I'll tell you the varieties in which nature won't solve this, right? So if a rock is coming at me, we'll just go from nature and in its most like non-soulful form. If a rock is coming at me and I try to like establish my rights in the face of this rock, the rock just rolls right over me, right? So nature is not working for my benefit, right? So we went from a rock to a tiger. If I try to establish my rights in the face of a tiger, I'll end up, if the tiger's hungry, I'll end up being mauled and eaten. So it doesn't really work. So that aspect of nature is not a system that's working in my benefit. So, and then what about like your pet dog? Your pet dog only likes you because you're familiar. And that's why we like dogs, because they'll bite the people who aren't familiar. But they only like you because you're familiar, not because like they sense some sort of inner dignity and you have like rights that it respects and it understands. And your pet cat will eat you before you turn cold. As soon as you have that heart attack and you stay a little bit too still, a little bit too long, your cat will just claw out your eyeballs first. So eat your greens. If you're a cat person, eat your greens. So that variety of nature is not a system that works for us. Even dogs, they only like you because you're familiar, as opposed to the people who aren't familiar. And cats, they only like you because you feed you. And now we have the urban jungle where like you go in and like, the movie where the young ingenue, naive, walks into New York or Paris or LA and then gets taken advantage of by, if this is a De Palma movie, someone seedy. Harvey Weinstein offers to take you for a date and offer you a part, and then it turns into something else. So that kind of trauma, once again, is educational. But understand that kind of urban jungle isn't really about your self-determination either. You just don't know that all of these forces are out to get you. And then there's the suburban jungle, which is very similar, except the suburban jungle acts as if they're trying to help you, but they're still concerned about themselves. They're just not concerned with actually taking anything from you. They're concerned with appearing a certain way to you. These are I always, when I give this lecture to white ladies, I always talk about the therapist whose like job is to smile and listen and nod, but they're not listening to what you say. Their job is to appear like a therapist. And just like a lot of your suburban friends, their job is to appear like they're your friends because it makes them feel good about being their friends. They're not actually concerned about your like wrestling with your freedom and how to enable that and all that stuff. That's why it's still a jungle. It's just more about superficial appearance than it is about like actually enabling your freedom. So all of these different varieties of nature are making people think, yeah, your pets will eat you. So it's making people want to get rid of their pets. Your pets like you because you're familiar, not because because it respects you as a person. It respects you because you're bigger and you're familiar and you happen to have food. And if it's a cat, it's because you happen to have food. So until you understand that all of these systems, natural systems, from the rock to the cat to, Regina George in the suburbs, is out to use you for its own end, you're not appropriately on guard. Because they always say that even if you don't care about even if you don't have designs to fight white supremacy has designs on you. It has designs on your mind. Right? And that goes for white people and black people and all the people in the middle. It has designs on you. And it has designs to make you think a certain way. So in order to kind of wrest you from those designs, it needs to happen externally. You can't do it yourself necessarily. It needs to happen from listening to me, especially when you don't want to listen. It needs, first of all, the best way to get people to listen to me is to force them to listen to me. That means organize an event. Don't tell them that you're going to be watching this 35 to 45 minute video and then make watching this 45-minute video a condition of being at that event. Because they're not going to want to listen to me because I make people feel a certain sort of way. It's going to feel invasive. But that's okay. They need the invasion. You need to traumatize them appropriately. They need to be betrayed by nature. Just like the person is betrayed by the rock, the person is betrayed by the tiger, that they thought that they was a friend. I think there's something happened in a zoo, right? Something happened in a zoo. Like someone wanted to go pet a tiger or an orangutan or something like that. And it turns out that the orangutan's a wild animal and it mauled them. And then they blamed the orangutan. But like it was always like wild animals are wild. The whole time. You need to be traumatized. You need to be into believing that into understanding the extent to which the system is not geared for your freedom. You need to be just like the boulder, the tiger, the dog, the cat, your employer. How many naive people go to their employer for life advice? Your employer does not care about your life. Your employer cares about profit. Profit. Like, don't go to your employer for life advice. That's like going, we hear about blue chip athletes all the time going to their coach for like life advice. No, your coach is not, don't go to your coach for academic advice. Your coach cares about you playing for that season, maybe even that game, or maybe even that play. Don't go to your coach for medical advice. They'll say a shot of cortisone is what you need for your soul. So you need to be appropriately betrayed. So the trauma at issue is betrayal. All right. So if you're appropriately betrayed, then you realize like you'll be a better ally. And this betrayal could also come in the form of gaslighting, because ideally you yourself don't need to be betrayed. You need to see someone else be betrayed and then understand that like, oh, that could be me. But a lot of people see someone else be betrayed and think, oh, that's not that big of a deal. Or it won't be me. So they need to actually fail the final exam before they learn the lesson. Preferably, you'll learn the lesson before you fail the final exam. Your boss is not your friend. Your boss is not like you. Yes. I hope that you don't need to experience the trauma firsthand before you learn the lesson. You just need to see someone else get mauled before you don't go around petting a tiger thinking I'm special. The tiger won't maul me. That's like, oh no, my boss is a cool boss. They're not going to sell me out. Then the pink slip comes and like the Negro wake up call is real. I'm sure in the chat they can tell you some real Negro. Go ahead. Go ahead in the chat. Feel free to write down the first time you realize what being black means and how you were kind of naive before. And a lot of parents like want to protect their kids. Like white parents want to protect their kids from the violence you do by being white, and black parents want to protect their kids from what it means to be black. And in protecting them, you're just keeping them naive and they need to be the kind of people who need to actually feel the betrayal before they understand the stakes of the system. And so we need to be and this is what civil disobedience is about. It's about actually waking people up to the stakes of their complicity in the system and letting it know that it won't go down. But in general, we need to understand that trauma is a part of growth. The right kind of trauma. And the right kind of trauma can come with betrayal. And you can learn it in a class, because what will happen is like the 16-year-olds will see something awful and then be told by all of the friends and family that this awful thing is okay. But deep down, they'll kind of think that like this awful thing might not be okay. And then they come to my class and I give them a structure to understand why the awful thing they thought was awful is actually as awful as they thought it was, and that their friends were all lying to them and their family was all lying to them. And then they get that trauma betrayal. Not that the bad thing happened to them, but they live in a world where everyone lied to them about how to interpret the bad thing that happened. And that's when they like now have a freer mind because they understand that the world has designs on gaslighting them. The world has designs on convincing them that they're crazy. The world has designs on making them think that black people deserve to be poor. There's a great bit of gaslighting going on in America with the reparations debate. By the way, a reparations debate happened. I think I might talk about that next show. But anyway, the reparations panel happened yesterday, and I'm very happy that a reparations panel happened. There's a record of it, and I think my only problem is that you had an actor, Danny Glover, who's actually like not the worst kind of actor, but I've seen him get owned by like regular people in regular debates just because he's an actor. Danny Glover, Ta-Nehisi Coates, who is a writer, but he's not like. He's an eloquent writer, and I read his remarks, and they weren't the worst remarks, but like there are people who could put some real flesh to this debate who weren't invited. Burgess Owens, who is an NFL player, and don't take life advice from professional athletes for a variety of reasons. One, they're freaks of nature. Like, you're a mutant. You're an NFL player. Most people are not, like, I'm 5'9". I'd be hard pressed to play a women's professional sport. So, and I'm like moderately athletic, but like, don't take professional advice from athletes because they don't live in your world. The world opens up differently to them because they're freaks, they're genetic freaks. So Burgess Owen, a professional athlete, and they're like either going to be like real Christian because God gave them, whatever speed, which is dubious, or they'll be like real Republican because they made all of their money by like tackling people. So don't take advice from athletes. That's not good for your success. And who else was there? This undergrad from Columbia who is paid. He's like Candace Owen. Is carving out a niche for himself by selling out entire people. And then who was the other person? I think there was this white lady I didn't get to hear. And then Dr. Julianne Malveaux, who's not bad. Dr. Julianne Malveaux is not dumb. But she still would have been on, like, if I put my starting five out there, like, Malveaux would have been on the bench. Coming in, like, if someone got sick, but still on the bench. And then Coates, he's a writer. Like there are people who've written entire books making this case. But there's this piece of gaslighting that's and like academics who've written entire books with like not Atlantic writers. Writing is fine, but I want Sandy Darity, I want Derek Hamilton, I want there are other people I want making that case. So the bit of gaslighting going on is like, none of you guys were alive during slavery, so why should we deal with it? Why does it matter to your life? And if that's true, then we need a 100% inheritance tax. We need a 100% inheritance tax because if you're not alive, then it shouldn't matter. If you didn't do it like in your life, or if like it shouldn't matter. But these Republicans who say that none of you guys were alive during slavery, so it's not about you. So like the institution of America doesn't owe you. They will get really in their feelings if you start talking about a 100% inheritance tax. And there are a few reasons why you want a 100% inheritance tax. We also need to force land and capital on the market. Because right now, if you're black and you have money, like you still can't get things because white people won't sell to us. Like, because you need to force them to put it on the market. And the way you force people to put stuff on the market, and if you're black and your parents is a baby boomer, because baby boomers, they die and then the kids can't get the house together, so they have to sell the house. You have to can't get the money together, so they sell the house. So in order to force people to put it on the market, you need to force them to put it on the market to sell. They won't sell voluntarily. So even if you're black and have money, you can't buy. This is the problem with Byron Allen, right? Like Byron Allen's suing a few people because like he can't buy his way onto cable access because Spectrum won't, or AT&T, or like the distributors won't distribute his channels. So you need an inheritance tax. You need these big taxes to force white people to put their assets on the market. And reparations could look like having a black-only auction that's held under market for these white assets. So you need to force them to sell in order for us to be made whole. Because a lot of the good land is already bought, right? And so, especially the land that's connected to infrastructure. We don't want just some farm that has no road going out of it and no well. Like we want the land that's connected to infrastructure. And in order to get access to the land that's connected to infrastructure, you need to force white people to sell, to put those assets on the market. Same with businesses. And so if you're talking about, how slavery is a long time ago and nobody was alive that suffered under it, that means we need to talk about all these white businesses that are 2 and 3 generations old, all these family businesses, and where descendants are being paid from the work of their grandfathers. And a lot of their grandfathers weren't that particularly good to our grandfathers. So that matters. So there's that issue of the inheritance. And also there's an issue of institutions. Institutions don't die like people do. Right? So if black people are going to be made whole, it's going to be made whole by institutions that were still around. And there are quite a few institutions that are still alive. MetLife, Aetna, the United States, all these institutions that were still around and had substantive interests in enslaving black bodies are still around and can still pay because they're still an institutional, you could follow the money. It's that same dollar. And here's the deal. The thing about money is, over the course of America, it's been growing. So we want interest. And the idea that just because I wasn't alive then it doesn't affect us. That's just not how we track other institutions' wealth. That's not how we track university endowments. We don't make every university start up every 40 years, with every generation, every 4 years. Yeah, that's it. The institutions. Yeah, every 4 years, institutions have to start from the beginning. No, that's not how an institution works. Just because the students come in and leave every 4 years. That's just not how it works. You grow over time. You grow over generations. And there are a lot of institutions that made money by profiting off of slave labor and slaves. And then definitely made money off of Jim Crow and terrorism. There are a lot of suburbs, all that suburban money that emerged because of the GI Bill being racialized and the FHA being racialized, and now they can charge a premium for their whiteness. All that money, all those real estate agents' kids and all those construction workers' kids who made money off of creating these gated communities that are anti-black, that money's still in the system. I want that money. And that money could either go to their bar mitzvah, it could go to their wedding, it could go to their quinceañera, or it could go to black people's pockets. And I want it to go to black people's pockets, or at least black people's schools or black people's jobs. So that's what I want. And that's the bit of gaslighting that is happening in the Republican circles and from Mitch McConnell himself, is that just because it didn't happen to you or maybe your parents, it doesn't matter. When I could go and hit a rock and run into a white institution that's been around for 3 or 4 generations that was around and thrived, and throw a rock and hit a white institution that thrived because of Jim Crow terrorism and, slavery. So you have to understand the ideological war that's on your mind to make you crazy for thinking that there's something called intergenerational wealth. And when you look at the black people are, what is it? I want to say 3 out of 5 black people who are born in the middle class are going to fall into poverty. Like we're downwardly mobile. There's a Brookings report. I think you just put in Brookings Bleak, 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 Brookings, it'll come up. And we're downwardly mobile. And it's because of generational, the lack of generational wealth, and this inequality actually creates predatory conditions that punish black people for being poor. And it creates more wealth for the people who have money while punishing black people for being poor. So if you see that, you're constantly being gaslit by people who think that intergenerational wealth doesn't matter, or who say that intergenerational wealth doesn't matter. But if you start talking to them about their inheritance, or honestly, if generational wealth doesn't matter, or then every gift to your kid once your kid hits 18 should be taxed heavily. If we're if we say that generations don't matter, then every gift that white people give to their over 18-year-old kids should be taxed at like 80%. All right? That means if you want your daughter to have a $40,000 wedding, that means we're going to tax 80% of that $40,000. So you need to have more money in order to have that $40,000 wedding. All right? That's the fictional world you're living in when you talk about intergenerational wealth not mattering. When you talk about like, well, none of you guys were alive during slavery. Yeah, but your grandparents got land from the Homestead Act. Like that 3-generation business that now allows you to work from your air-conditioned vehicle while your cousin, while day laborers do the real work. Like that 3-generation long business exists because what happened 3 generations ago matters. There's a huge construction project going in down. They're rebuilding a middle school right by me. The construction company is Carroll Daniel. It's a construction company based in Gainesville. It's a white company. I say that because you go to the website, Carroll Daniel Construction Company. It's all white people. So it's a white company. The school that they're building is predominantly black, but the company that's building is a white company, started in 1946 by the owner's grandfather. So, yeah. In 1946, black people could not start a construction company and get the quality of contracts that could make it a generational company. All right, so I'm just saying that if we have a company that got a multi-million-dollar contract that was started in 1946, then it turns out that people who are dead actually matter to the and that company hires a lot of cousins. So people who are dead actually matter. So institutions don't die like people do. And families don't die. Family lines don't die like people do. Lineages don't die like people do. Barron Trump, Donald Trump's son, is going to have a very good life because of not Donald Trump, but Fred Trump. And Fred Trump had a very good life because of government contracts. And that's one reason he was such a good Klansman. So these lineages matter if we actually care about dollars, if we care about justice. And if you don't admit that, then you're just gaslighting. That just is a term to when you drive other people crazy by telling them something that's not true, but something that they know is true. When you tell them that generational wealth doesn't matter, and just because you weren't alive during slavery, it means you're not owed anything from the systems that slavery sustained. That's all just lying to you. That's all just a form of lying to you. And until you understand that all of these ideological apparatuses are organized to lie to you and get you to blame yourself. They don't just have designs on your behavior. They have designs on how you think about your behavior. Until you understand that, then you're not that great of an ally. But understanding that requires a quality of invasion that might be traumatic. Like the first time you're fired for doing the right thing is traumatic. But you're no longer a sucker. The first time you're traumatized for doing the right thing, the first time you see someone traumatized for doing the right thing, you're like, ooh, that's bad. And then the first time someone tells you that, no, it's justified, then you realize, oh, if that happens to me, they're going to tell themselves some sort of story about how it's justified that it happens to me. That's traumatic. But that's the kind of trauma that actually is educational. They call it the Negro wake-up call. The first time what it means to be black. A lot of people who think that they're allies haven't been appropriately traumatized yet. So, and this is why, there's a running joke in the community about how we're conspiracy people. But the syphilis studies were real. That's not conspiracy. That's CloneTel is real, right? The plots are real. So if you're not appropriately wary, if you don't understand the plots against you, against your mind, you're actually just naive and dangerous. And some people are dangerous because they're naive. Some people are paid to pretend that they're being naive. And, I don't fault black people in that position because It's hard work trying to get on as a black person. And one of the great jobs there is in these United States is paying to be naive about how hard it is to be black. Is being paid to be naive about how hard it is to be black. But they're still dangerous and they're not allies. So in order to revolutionize people, you're going to have to traumatize them a little bit. It's going to feel invasive. These political broadcasts they're going to feel invasive. No one's going to voluntarily listen to me talk like this. That's why if you're serious about like the quality of political education that I'm delivering every week, you need to sit them down and maybe incentivize them to sit through the whole thing because they're not going to want to hear this. They're not going to want to hear this. Changing people's idea about what the world is actually a function, and them in it actually changes them, and people don't want to change. For a variety of reasons. They don't want to get their heart broken, and like maybe they've eked out like a pretty comfortable life supporting injustice. So one, if you like what I'm doing, go ahead and go to thefunkyacademic.com and go ahead and sign up for $5, $15, or $50 a month. Or give a one-time enormous donation. That'd be fine. I got to pay rent, and I'd like to actually pay my people. And you know, depending on who you talk to, I'm making myself quasi-unemployable by talking like this. So if you support the work I'm doing, thanks is good, but thanks doesn't help me organize. Thanks doesn't take care of my marketing budget. Go ahead to go to thefunkyacademic.com and kick down a little bit. Also, like I want to get my kids into violin lessons, and the youngest in violin and the oldest in cello. All these things cost. And I don't want to jeopardize. If you don't want my truth telling to jeopardize my kids' musical education, then go ahead and go to the Funky Academic. Also, so yeah, and send this around. Because the idea that you have to traumatize in order to revolutionize is going to hurt a lot of people's feelings, but people have to feel the betrayal before they understand the struggle. They have to feel the betrayal of the world before they understand the struggle. As long as they think that the system works, or at least they can eke their way around it, then they don't know what it means to be black. Because even if it works for you individually, it still hasn't worked for you individually because you put yourself in a world full of sharks. You've moved to the suburbs, and now, like, it's stressful. You don't have any friends. How many black people in the suburbs are lonely? A lot. They got their nice house. They wanted to live nice. They wanted to live like white people live, except white people get to live around people like them. So black people living like white people live means you're living around white people, which means you still don't get to live like white people live, because they get to live around themselves. So until you understand the plot against you, not only to control your behavior, but to control your mind, how you think about your behavior, you're not going to be a very good ally because you still think the system works. Now, once you understand that the system is not organized for black community success, then we could do some work. As long as you're holding on to the idea that I could be the exception, and there's a lot of people who are paid good money to convince you that being the exception is good, that being exceptional is good, being the first black is, no, being the first black isn't nothing unless like, in 3 years, there aren't like 25 others. Anybody who's proud of being the first and only black, anything, is a problem. Because if you're doing it right, if you're the first black something, you should immediately be like getting other black people there, like in numbers, clusters. And poor black people, not just like, you know, bougie black people who've all kind of got together in the Jack and Jill Club. I said it. To decide that, you know, these are the only black people who matter and the other black people are just going to have to forsake. So until you understand the extent to which you are forsaken, until you understand the betrayal of systems that have convinced you that they're your friends, you're not going to be a very good ally. But understanding that's traumatizing, and understanding that isn't something you can come to on your own. It's going to have to be an external circumstance. Either you see something and then someone lies to you about it. The lying is the trauma. Or like you get fired or broken up with or dropped or something like that for something related to like the truth about being black. Then you're appropriately woken up. As long as you think that the system works, you're a danger. You're a danger. Yeah, I hope I've made that clear. In order to revolutionize, you need to traumatize, but it needs to be the right kind of trauma. Trauma needs to be a variety of betrayal. People need to feel the betrayal of just about everything that they've been accustomed to trust. Then we could talk about doing the structural justice, because the structure itself is built in these antibodies that go at your mind. The structure, the unjust structure, like has a design to get you to be the kind of person who makes excuses for the unjust structure. So that's what being woke means. A lot of people think they are, but really, until they've felt that trauma of betrayal, and conspiratorial betrayal, you need to know that other people are in a room plotting how to control your mind, and through controlling your mind, control your behavior. Amen. Yes, it needs to be it's happened to be, and you need to be aware of the conspiratorial betrayal. People, it's not just natural; it just kind of happens. So, like, it broke your way. It didn't break your way this time, but maybe next time. No, there's intentional minds organizing the world, trying to control your mind in order to do something about your behavior that's good for them. Right? It may not be good for you and your people. So until you get that wake-up call, like you might be a problem. So my job, and I teach philosophy, is to kind of institutionalize that wake-up call. And that's what, for a lot of people, the trial and death of Socrates, like, listen, all right, I'm going to get biblical here. All right, so a lot of people, the trial and death, like the reason why, like the intro in philosophy, you teach the trial and death of Socrates, is that you need to see this man get killed for the truth. One of the reasons Jesus Christ had to go to the cross and die is because you needed to see the depth of the struggle. If the system saved him, you'd be like, well, I don't really have to be vigilant about my religion because like the system will be all right. But once you see Jesus die for it, you'll know that, oh no, like I am a danger as a Christian. Once you see Socrates die for the truth, you see that people who care about the truth are actually dangerous. But you also see that if you don't care about the truth, if you don't care about your spirit, you're living a meaningless life and you're just a pawn of someone else's conspiracy anyway. Right? So, yeah, as long as you think that the system works, and this is why Jesus had to die on the cross. This is why Socrates had to come back with a guilty verdict. Because as long as you think that the system works, you're not going to be anything for the struggle for justice. And I hope that was clear. What time are we running? How are we doing? I hope that was clear. I hope you send this around to all of your friends. Hope you kick down for me $5.15. What, 38? Yeah, I hope you kick down $5.15 or $50 a month to keep me to do this. Next week I'm going to talk about, I'm either going to talk about rights or I'm going to go harder in on this panel that happened about reparations. I'm either going to talk about rights, democratic socialism, or the panel. But next week it's going to be a good show. But I hope you understand that until people feel that trauma, they will not be appropriate revolutionized. And that trauma comes in the form of betrayal. They need to be betrayal. The first time you go to your employer and ask them for life advice, and then you file and they give you the life advice, and it turns out that life advice is good for the company, but not exactly good for your life, that's the betrayal you need. First time you go to your employer and divulge, well, I have good news, I'm pregnant, and then they fire you, that's the betrayal you need about knowing about the private labor market. So like that's the, so how to institutionalize that, and then kind of either institutionalize the actual feeling of betrayal or institutionalize the kind of shine a light on the gaslighting of the betrayal you've seen. A lot of people have seen ugly things happen, and then they've been told by all their friends and family that this ugly thing that happened isn't really that ugly, and that the person it happened to deserved it. part of my job as a teacher is saying that, like, actually that ugly thing that happened is absolutely as ugly as you think it is. And all of those people who told you that it wasn't as ugly as you think it is, they're lying to you. They're trying to control your emotions and keep you away from the truth. And they think they're doing it for your own good, but they're taking away your agency. So that sort of like shining a light onto the industry that's around gaslighting and mind control is actually like part of the job of philosophy. It's also part of the job of religion, and it's what we need in order for people to actually understand the struggle. Because you can't be both naive and an ally. Naive money spends, so go ahead and give it to me. But naive, you can't be both a naive and an ally, because you need to understand that there's a conspiracy that's organized to control your mind in order to control your behind. And we can redress this if we get everyone on the same page and free each other. But we need to have these invasive, hard conversations, or you need to sit people down in front of this invasive video. Because the hard conversation is going to feel invasive, because it's going to externally kind of control you. I mean, externally turn you away from forces that you've become rather comfortable with and might even feed you. So with that, I'm going to leave you, let you be, and I'll see you next week.